Welcome back. My name is Rob Sumner, owner of Sumner Specialized Physical Therapy and Specialized Strength. I do these videos and podcasts because there are a ton of people out there that are in pain, and I do not want you to be one of them. So I'm looking to improve your life in any way I can. So I hope that these videos and podcasts help you. So let's get started. So we're talking today about frozen shoulder, and this comes about because it is Shoulder Pain Awareness Month for us at our clinic, but also the thing about frozen shoulder is not always well known. It's called adhesive capsulitis. It is a disorder that doesn't have a known cause that says this is the reason that you get it. It can be an insidious onset, meaning unknown. So this comes about because my mother-in-law had frozen shoulder at one time, and it was an interesting situation because she progressively lost motion in her shoulder, and we had to stretch it. So we had to progress with our therapy, and it was a challenge for her. And one thing that I've learned is that the hardest patients ever to treat are your own family. And the reason your own family are the hardest to treat is because there's a different level of a relationship with a family member than there is with an individual that you see in the public. And part of it is that there's a certain level of respect that's given to a professional and some level of wiggle room for the provider to just provide what they need to. But when you're family, there's it's like trying to coach your own kid. There's a certain relationship that's already been built that doesn't have that same level, and I won't really call it respect. It's just more of professional decorum. And when you're treating family members, you lose a little bit of that. So with my mother-in-law, it was interesting because to try and push her range of motion the way that we needed to for her shoulder would usually lead to her yelling at me and telling me that I'm hurting her. So it was an interesting process. Kelly did eventually improve to the point where she's doing well. But overall, the frozen shoulder is a disorder that plagues a lot of people. And part of the process of frozen shoulder is we don't always know that we're getting it. So it usually happens to individuals that are over the age of 45. It usually happens to individuals that have had some type of injury. So they take a fall, they land on the shoulder, they fall to an outstretched hand. There's some level of injury that occurs. It also is more prominent in individuals that have diabetes. So you're more prone to it after the age of 45, 50 if you have diabetes. So overall, the key with frozen shoulder is we don't always know that there's a direct onset that this occurs from, and it's not always predictive. But what we can say are for individuals that end up hurting the shoulder, a fall, a trauma, and then they immobilize, so they don't move it very much and they keep it close to the body and they don't go through their motion, it does have a greater propensity for those cascade of events to lead to a frozen shoulder. So today, I want to truly help you in your life to either prevent or improve your frozen shoulder adhesive capsulitis problems. Okay, so let's first get into how do you even know that you have frozen shoulder? How do you even know that you have adhesive capsulitis? Well, one of the typical patterns that you see is that loss of range of motion. It's always going to be there. You're going to lose your range of motion. And what do you first start to notice? You first start to notice that to reach back behind you and grab your wallet or to undo your bra, well, it starts getting harder. The shoulder feels tighter and it starts to hurt more. So you're going through this freezing stage where everything's starting to bind down. It's starting to, the capsule itself, which are all the ligaments that go around the joint, are starting to bind down. And when that starts to bind down, that creates a problem because now you can't use the range of motion that you want to up overhead, behind your back, to tuck in your shirt, to take off your bra, to put in your wallet. So the first one you notice is the behind the back motion, but we don't always use that motion. So we don't always know that we're losing it. The second one we start to lose is out to the side and up overhead. When we start moving our arm up overhead, we start noticing it's tighter, but also might be painful. And the last one we start to lose is straight up in front of our body. So you can see from this progression, we don't always understand that we're starting to progressively lose the motion to our shoulder. Plus, we're optimistic and we think that it's just going to improve. It's just going to get better on its own. But it doesn't always do that. So the first defining factor that you see is you start losing range of motion. The second factor, you start noticing that you're getting pain at end range. So whatever motion that you have that has been lost, you're starting to notice it's getting painful at end range. Okay? The third one you start to notice is it starts to get harder with a lot of your activities. It's harder to lift, harder to push, pull, etc. So you might even get pain with those. So those are the classic ones. Now, if you're over the age of 45 and you can associate this to a direct injury, a fall, a shoulder injury, that you limited it, you stopped moving the arm, you held it close to the body, that's a good chance that you are developing frozen shoulder symptoms. On a clinical side, one of the things that I'm looking for is, does the capsule feel restricted? So when I actually glide and I feel into that shoulder and I start pushing and looking for that, what we call accessory mobility to the shoulder, if I'm finding that the accessory mobility is restricted, that's another sign that tells me, yep, they're getting frozen shoulder. Okay? So you go through this freezing stage where the capsule itself starts to tighten up. It starts to restrict overall. The second thing that you're going to start to get is that lack of range of motion. So you're currently right now in that freezing stage. You're in that, it's freezing down. The second stage that you want to get into is that you start progressing to is the frozen stage. And that's when it's not getting any worse, it's not getting any better, it's pretty much locked at that position. It's locked. And that's where you think, well, maybe it's not getting any worse. Maybe it's going to start improving. And that's the perfect time to really start your treatment. We want to start improving your range of motion. You want to start improving your overall ability to use your arm. Okay? The last stage that you go through is the thawing stage, and that's where the capsule itself starts to release. It starts to improve in mobility. Your pain starts going down. Your motion starts improving. So let's go through 4 top ways that you can start improving your frozen shoulder symptoms before they even get started. Okay? So let's say that you have an injury, a fall to an outstretched hand, you've hurt the shoulder. One of the things that you want to do is start maintaining your mobility. So by doing just passive range of motion activities on a table, on a wall, keep the shoulder going. You don't have to go into pain, but just slowly keeping those movements going. Even what we call a pendulum exercise, where you swing the arm side to side. All those movements are overall going to help you maintain some of the mobility to the capsule, and it won't allow, or it will decrease the chance for that capsule to start a cascade of events where it tightens up. So the first one is the mobility. The second one, continue to attempt to use the shoulder with normal daily activities in a pain-reduced fashion. So we don't want to pin it to your side. We don't want to put on just a sling and hold it to your side. We want to continue to try and use it just lightly. That light movement is going to help decrease your chance for frozen shoulder. The third thing you can do is start light weight bearing activity. So they found that by just putting your arm on a table and pushing weight into it, side to side movements, kind of like a modified push-up in a way, that stimulation back to the joint also helps prevent some of the cascade events for frozen shoulder. And the fourth one you can do is anything below the shoulder itself, squeezing a ball, elbow mobility type work. All of those are going to help decrease the chance for frozen shoulder. So the key thing I'm telling you, motion. We definitely need mobility in the shoulder after an injury to prevent that cascade of events. Okay? So what do you do if you have frozen shoulder? If you're through the thawing phase, what do you need to do to advance forward? Well, the best way to improve your mobility is truly in our clinic by allowing us to mobilize your shoulder. Because your joint works in a certain way. You have what's called accessory mobility, which is the light gliding that occurs in the joint. And then you see the actual motion out to the side. So that's where the hand moves up over the body. So in order for your hand to move up over your body, you need that joint to glide, slide, and roll in the joint itself to make it happen. And the best way to start improving that motion is for us to stretch the capsule specifically. And it's very important to stretch the capsule, because if you don't, and you only stretch the arm itself on a wall or on the table, that mobility is still restricted in the capsule. And as you stretch on the table, it hits that limit in the capsule itself. And now it just forces the humeral head or the shoulder head up into the joint, and it just pinches your rotator cuff over and over and over. So you'll feel like, gosh, I've been doing all these stretches, I've been doing all this stuff to try and improve my mobility, and it's not getting any better, and my shoulder just hurts twice as much. Yep. And that's because before you really start getting to the stretching, you really need to improve the mobility of the capsule first. And that will allow the shoulder to glide and give space for that rotator cuff when you're stretching up overhead. So first, we got to improve the capsule mobility. Second, you got to start improving the range of motion up overhead. Some of that might be soft tissue work that we have to do into the muscles itself to elongate them. The third thing is we're going to start adding some light scapular, so the muscles that connect to the shoulder blade, scapular strengthening. And then the last part we're going to get into is some rotator cuff strengthening, and then working back to normal daily activities. But the key factor with the rotator cuff impingement from frozen shoulder is you don't want to start that. The more you start getting a pinch on that rotator cuff, it leads to rotator cuff trauma and possible rotator cuff failure. So the biggest part I'm trying to press, we want to prevent frozen shoulder by doing early mobility after a shoulder injury. But if you do start getting frozen shoulder, the best thing you can do is get us to start stretching the capsule. Start improving the mobility to the capsule. Because without it, you're going to try and stretch the shoulder. It's only going to make it worse. You're going to continue to have symptoms. And then you're going to go, geez, is this ever going to get better? So big message, big take-home message. Frozen shoulder is something that is correctable, something that we see a lot in the clinic. It's easily taken care of in our clinic for individuals that are in that frozen stage. If you're in the thawing or the freezing stage, there's other things that we can do, but that's for another podcast. But for right now, the biggest thing I want you to take home, you need early mobility to the shoulder itself and the elbow and the surrounding musculature. And if you do get frozen shoulder, we definitely need to start stretching the capsule itself to improve the mobility. So then when you do your stretches, it just doesn't pinch the rotator cuff. So overall, if you're getting frozen shoulder out there, I wish you the best. Hopefully these tips will help you right away to help prevent a frozen shoulder, but also to give you the best chance for recovery. So all in all, hopefully those tips help. Feel free to message me. Feel free to send me an email if you have more questions regarding frozen shoulder. And if you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe, but also give us a review. All right. Thanks, team.